Okay, for the remainder of the afternoon, the big topics we want to hit before we actually finish is search, user defaults, and some animations, right? So we'll hit those three topics, and then we'll conclude our review with our top stories project. Is that fair for everybody? Yes? Okay, cool. So where did we stop before lunch? Before lunch, we added our picker view. Our picker view shows all the sections of our New York Times paper, right? So we have a list of all our sections here. The next task at hand was a to-do item that we said if we were able to do before lunch, that would be great. Basically, if I go to magazine here and I click on my news feed, I wanted to load magazine news, right? And also change the title. Was everybody able to get to that, right? Very good. So we have Ben Benito. Give it up for Ben Benito. You might have to just change the multimedia item. Is that what it is? Yeah, so just make that optional if you saw that there. Very good. So always pushing ourselves there is the goal. Making the extra gets us to that place we want to go. Okay, cool. So let's do it together. Again, hats off to Ben Benito there for completing the to-dos. But now we'll do them together. So we will go back to our settings view controller. In our settings view controller, we want to capture. As we exit the door, let's try to not make it bang as loud by holding onto the handle there. Holding onto the handle there. So, okay. As the user scrolls through my picker view and they select an item, I want to capture that item and store it in my user defaults, right? This is goal number one. Everybody, right? So I scroll through my picker view. I scroll through my picker view here in my settings page. If they select magazine, I want to put magazine in user defaults. The string magazine, I want to store it in my user defaults. So that when I go over to my news feed, I could query, does user defaults have some value in it? If that value is different from my own value, I want to reload my API. Everybody? Questions about that? Okay. Basically, this is the New York Times, right? Like the app we're working on right now, the group project, right? Okay, so let's go off to magazine here. In my settings view controller, where is the place I'm going to capture when the user changes their selection? What method am I implementing? What's that? Which method am I implementing to capture when the user changes the picker view? How do I know they changed the picker view? Yes, Tiffany?
Would it be did select row?
Did select row would be the correct method there. So as the user is toggling or changing the selections of the picker view, did select row at on my picker view gets called. This is the only way I know the user changed something. Okay, so this is the place I will listen for changes in the did select. Very good. So here in my picker view delegate, I'll implement did select here. Again, this is review. We've done this a few times here. We did that with our first app that we did programmable UI. For our color programmatic UI, we use that same logic. So it becomes a pattern and it becomes clear where we headed here. So did select row at, that gets called. At this point, I want to store the current selected section or new section in user defaults. Okay? Before we do anything, I want to print it for us to make sure we all on board here with what's getting printed. So, let's use string interpolation here. Doesn't really matter. I could simply say, what's my array called? Sections. Sections and the row will be the name of the thing that was selected. Row was selected. Is it row? Just a section. Section was selected. Again, we don't want to go ahead and do user defaults, do everything first, and then the function is not even getting called, or it's not happening, right? Print statement, see what's happening, then go to the next step. So let's run our app and make sure this works correctly. So we go to our settings page, and we scroll through our picker view. It stopped on business, which makes sense. This is the last place it stopped. If I go to my picker view again, it stopped on magazine. Do we all confirm that our picker view does select the correct item? Yeah, very good. Awesome. Next step, let's go ahead and create, we'll keep it here for now. At the very top of my class, we'll create some struct here. We'll call it user key. And we'll say user key, what am I going to call this? Section key? Section name? News section. User key dot section name. User key dot news section. So instead of hard coding, again, instead of hard coding this news section everywhere, because we'll be accessing our user defaults key in our newsfeed controller, right? So we don't want to start hard coding string literals everywhere in our code. We know where that leads to bugs. So we created a simple struct called user key, and the way we access this key is user key dot news section. And yes, I put it in our class for now, but I could totally create our own file and call it user key. But for now, we keep it in our settings view controller file for simplicity, but we could move it out later. Great. Okay. Did we all type out our struct user key? Yes. All right. Awesome. Now let's go to the very bottom, remove our print statement here. Actually, let's just do this and say let section equal to this, like that. Why do we have to remove all our hard work? All right, so here we have a section name. Let's call it section name. I have a section name. I want to save it to user defaults. Mel, how do I save to user defaults here? Okay, so user default dot standard dot object for key, or set object for key, sorry. And our object, what object are we saving? Section name. And what's the key? What's that? User key, right? The one we just created. User key dot section name. Use section name, new section. Should we change it to section name? That reads better. Let's change it to section name here. Keep it consistent. Section name. Section name. So at this point, we've saved a value to user defaults. The value we saved is the section name that the user selected, right? Let's go ahead and run the app again. Run the app. Okay, go back to settings and select some section. I'll select business. I'll stop the app, and we'll go and write some code in our newsfeed controller. At this point, we did save because we do have 954, right? It's saved to user defaults. So now we go off to our newsfeed controller. I'm in my newsfeed controller. In my viewed load, I'm fetching stories, fetch stories with a default value. I have a default value called section here, section name. All that is good. Okay. Okay. Right here in our fetch stories, let's go ahead and use retrieve. Retrieve a section name from user defaults. We'll say if let section name equal to user defaults dot standard dot object for key, and our key is Luba. What's the key? So user key dot section name. Okay. Okay, what type is section name? What data type is section name? Right now it's an any, right? We need to typecast it to a string in order for it to be a string as we intended. So here we'll say string, and now it's a string name, section name.
Why is that a string? I mean, why is that
An int?
It's not an int, it's a string.
I'm sorry. Oh, no, any. If we don't typecast it to a string, it will be an any type. Right? So if I option click on it, yeah, it doesn't matter. Retrieving from user defaults, you need to typecast it to the type you expect. Okay? Very good. So here we have section name, great. Else, we'll do something else here. Okay. Let's do a couple things. Let's take a break here and go create some sort of variable that captures what section name is. Let us go to the very top right about here, and we'll create a variable called section name. Section name will say default of technology as we had before, or any name you want here, doesn't really matter. So section name has a default value, technology. We could update this, remove that. Default value we have here. Actually, probably keep it. Keep it. Okay, so here we have section name, and we'll set self.section name equal to section name here. So at this point, we set our section name to whatever value it is.
So do we have to put that there then, if that's the point, if that's the case, you want to put that in the or no?
1 second, what's that?
If it's going to connect to the variable that's holding the name, should that not?
The logic we're going after there is we want to also verify that the section title is not the same as technology, for example, before we go ahead and do any fetch, if that makes sense, or a new fetch, right? Okay, so we fetch something. We have a section name here. We could do a comparison. So if section name is not equal to self.section name, right? Then we have a new value. We are looking at a new section. No, I didn't. It's still here as a default value.
No, and not self.section name section.
Yeah, I did. Yes, sorry, I did. We're going for a different logic here. We just want to verify if the section from defaults is different, if it's different from the section name we had from the beginning. Right?
After we set it.
We haven't set it yet. We're just looking. Like when I come back from my settings, if I change the technology and technology exists already, I'm not going to override that. Okay, so if section name in user defaults is different from the section name I'm looking at, we are looking at a new section here. We will query the API or make a new query. If there's nothing in user defaults, then we are making a default query here. Make a default, use the default section name. Use the default section name. There's many ways to approach that, but we're trying to approach it to not make unnecessary requests to the API. Okay? Okay, cool. So I think what we could do here is take this line of code, or that line of code here, fetch stories, cool. Take this out and make a separate function. So private function, ooh, danger Will Robinson. Private function query API for now. Query API for section. It's not inside of the fetch. It's a different function. It's a helper function. We just took it out of fetch. So here, if section name is not equal to, we are looking at a new section. So go ahead and make a new query, right? So here we'll say query API with section name.
So for right now on the section search, instead of just doing a did set, on this section, instead of just doing a did set, a did set.
I'm assuming you've done, have you gone forward?
I did, but what I did was that.
If yours works, keep it where it is.
Oh, I didn't. Okay. I went forward, but I also stopped to wait to see how it worked.
Okay.
And I'm just asking, wouldn't you just do a did set on your variable to fetch the stories for that, like using the user defaults? Like if you've already made your user defaults,
Oh, you're saying like instead of like our section name here?
instead of making another function, because you already have fetch stories, wouldn't you just reload?
We might end up refactoring that fetch stories to be simpler, right? Right now, what we want to do for our fetch stories, if there's a new name, like if it changed, the only time we want to make a query is if the name got changed
Right.
to what we were looking at before.
Okay.
That's the only thing we want to do.
Okay, so.
We want to avoid making multiple calls. That's the only reason.
So right now, we only have on our variable just the string.
Yes. Okay, so here simply call, oh man.